Imagine walking through the vibrant streets of ancient Rome in 67 AD, where the emperor himself, Nero, strides confidently through the crowd. Beside him, a stunning woman, draped in silken robes and sparkling jewels, catches everyone's eye. She's beautiful, commanding attention, as Nero's new wife, but there's a dark secret beneath the surface. This woman is not who she appears to be. The woman beside Nero is, in fact, a boy named Sporus, a boy who was forcibly castrated and transformed into a living replica of Nero's dead wife, Octavia. His identity stripped away, Sporus is now forced to live out a twisted fantasy designed to satisfy Nero's obsession with his lost love. What drives a man with absolute power to reduce another human being to this? What makes an emperor turn a boy into a living puppet for his grief? This horrifying act of control, obsession, and manipulation is one of the most disturbing stories of the Roman Empire, and it all starts with Nero's descent into madness. If this story is shocking you, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now, and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It's amazing to explore these dark moments of history together, no matter where we are. As Nero's reign deepened, his obsession with his late wife, Poppaea Sabina, consumed him. When she died under mysterious circumstances, Nero's grief spiraled into something darker, an unrelenting obsession that drove him to an unimaginable act. In his desperate attempt to bring her back, Nero found a way to recreate her in the form of Sporus, a young boy in his court who bore a striking resemblance to his lost love. But this wasn't just about loss, it was about power, control, and the lengths an emperor would go to bend the world to his will. Nero didn't just want to replace Poppaea, he sought to completely reshape another person's identity to fit his twisted vision. What followed was a horrific transformation. Sporus's body mutilated, his identity erased, and his life twisted to serve Nero's dark desires. As the story unfolds, we see how this gruesome act not only changed the course of Sporus's life, but also revealed the terrifying nature of unchecked power and obsession. Nero's journey to the throne was anything but ordinary. Born in 37 AD to the ambitious Agrippina the Younger, his rise to power was orchestrated long before he even came of age. Agrippina, a woman driven by her thirst for power, saw in her son the means to secure her own position in Rome's imperial court. Upon the death of Emperor Claudius in 54 AD, many believed it was no accident. Rumors swirled that Agrippina, perhaps with poison, had removed her husband to clear the path for Nero's ascension. At just 16 years old, Nero was crowned emperor, but his reign wasn't entirely his own at first. Agrippina, a master of manipulation, wielded most of the real power. For the first few years, Nero's public image was that of a well-intentioned youthful ruler. He enacted reforms aimed at easing the burdens on Rome's citizens, reducing taxes, improving the economy, and supporting public entertainment. The public adored their new emperor, who seemed to promise an era of prosperity and change. Rome's elite, however, were keenly aware that Nero was little more than a puppet in his mother's hands. Agrippina dominated the political landscape, controlling many of Nero's early decisions and directing the course of his rule. But Nero's character, shaped by his dependence on Agrippina, began to show signs of internal conflict. The ambitious young ruler, who initially appeared to be a promising change from the previous emperors, would soon struggle with his desire for independence. This tension between mother and son would eventually become the catalyst for Nero's tragic downfall. What seemed to be a reign of potential was, in fact, the beginning of an obsession that would see Nero sacrifice everything, even the most basic human decency, in his pursuit of power. Nero's reign, marked by moments of public celebration, was also one of increasing personal instability. His relationship with his first wife Octavia was political from the start, arranged to secure his position as emperor. She was the daughter of Emperor Claudius, a symbol of power, but to Nero she was little more than a pawn in his mother's carefully constructed plan. Their marriage, cold and emotionless, was built on duty, not love. However, everything changed when Nero met Poppaea Sabina. Poppaea was not only beautiful but also ambitious, intelligent, and strong-willed, traits that Nero found irresistible. She represented everything Octavia was not: vivacious, commanding, and willing to embrace the political games of the Roman court. The affair between Nero and Poppaea quickly became more than just an illicit romance. It morphed into an obsession. Nero, once a seemingly calm and rational ruler, began to unravel emotionally as his desire for Poppaea grew into a consuming fixation. His jealousy knew no bounds. Nero became increasingly paranoid, controlling and erratic in his behavior, especially when it came to Poppaea. He would fly into fits of rage if another man looked at her too long, and he placed guards around her constantly. His obsession with her beauty and influence blinded him to his duties as emperor, and he began to see her as something to be possessed, not loved. This obsession took a devastating toll on his marriage to Octavia. When Nero felt that Octavia was no longer useful to him, he did the unthinkable. He had her exiled and ultimately executed. In a fit of cold fury, Nero forced her out of Rome, and rumors suggested that her death came by his order. His violent reaction to her disobedience wasn't just a political maneuver, it was the culmination of his deepening emotional instability. Octavia, once his dutiful wife, had become a mere obstacle to his ultimate obsession. Nero's growing emotional instability would only intensify. With the death of Octavia, his obsession with Poppaea reached a fever pitch, laying the groundwork for an even more twisted and destructive fixation, his eventual transformation of Sporus into a living embodiment of Poppaea. Sporus was just a boy, likely no older than 14 or 15 when he first entered Nero's court. Born into slavery within the imperial household, he was freed and given a position of relative privilege, though still bound by the whim of his masters. But what set him apart from others in the court wasn't his intelligence or skill, it was his striking resemblance to Poppaea Sabina, Nero's late wife. His eyes, his delicate bone structure, and his youthful features mirrored the empress Nero had lost. One fateful day, Nero first saw Sporus, and something within him shifted. The emperor, already unraveling under the weight of grief and obsession, saw in this young boy not just a servant, but a vessel, a way to resurrect his dead wife. To Nero, Sporus was more than a person. He was the key to undoing his greatest loss. The boy's physical resemblance to Poppaea seemed like a divine sign, a chance to bring her back into his life, to fulfill a twisted version of the fantasy he couldn't let go of. What followed was a decision that would forever alter Sporus's life. Nero, in his obsessive quest to make Sporus a perfect replica of his lost love, ordered a gruesome procedure. Sporus was castrated. This was not just a physical mutilation, it was the erasure of Sporus's identity. His body was forever altered to fit Nero's vision of what Poppaea should be. The operation was painful, dangerous, and, for Sporus, emotionally devastating. No longer a boy, but a creation of Nero's grief, Sporus was thrust into a life that was not his own. The psychological toll on Sporus was unimaginable. Stripped of his identity, he was forced to live as a substitute for the woman Nero could never let go of. Dressed in silks, adorned with jewels, and forced to act as if he were Poppaea herself, Sporus was a puppet in Nero's personal tragedy. The life that Sporus had known was gone. He was now nothing more than an object, a grotesque symbol of the emperor's obsession. Once Nero had transformed Sporus into his vision of Poppaea, the emperor wasted no time parading him as his wife in public ceremonies. Nero's obsession had turned Sporus into more than just a pawn. He became the living embodiment of Nero's grief, a grotesque manifestation of the wife Nero could never bring back. Dressed in elaborate gowns adorned with jewels that once belonged to Poppaea, Sporus was thrust into a fabricated life, one that was not his own. In the grand halls of the palace and at public events, Sporus was made to sit by Nero's side, expected to perform the role of empress to perfection. Nero didn't just want a companion, he wanted to showcase his twisted fantasy to the world. Every glance, every gesture, was meticulously monitored by Nero to ensure Sporus maintained the illusion of being Poppaea. This wasn't a marriage in any real sense, it was a public spectacle, a display of power, control, and unchecked obsession. For Sporus, the pressure was immense. He was no longer allowed the dignity of a person. His body, his appearance, and even his actions were controlled by Nero's will. In private, he was forced to pretend to be the woman Nero had lost, while in public he was paraded around like a living trophy. The psychological manipulation was deep and cruel. Sporus had no room for autonomy. He had to be what Nero wanted him to be, day in and day out, in front of the entire Roman Empire. The Romans themselves were horrified and fascinated by this spectacle. While some were repulsed by Nero's behavior, others whispered about the emperor's madness. Nero's obsession with Sporus as a stand-in for Poppaea challenged the very foundations of Roman society, where gender roles and family structures were seen as sacrosanct. The bizarre marriage was not only a public humiliation for Sporus, but a cruel reminder of the power Nero wielded over life and identity. The emperor had taken the most personal, human aspects of existence and turned them into a performance, a grotesque display of his total control. Imagine what it must have felt like for Sporus, waking up every day in a world that had erased who he was. A boy, forced to become something else, to live out Nero's twisted version of reality. He wasn't just physically altered, he was psychologically shattered. His very identity was stolen from him, reshaped into the image of someone else. A boy who had his own hopes, dreams and desires was now trapped in a role he never asked for, forced to embody someone else's grief-stricken obsession. Every morning, Sporus looked into the mirror and saw someone else, a version of Poppaea, not the person he once was. This wasn't just a transformation of his body, it was the destruction of his soul. He was forced to play the part of the emperor's lost love, pretending to be something he could never truly be. Each time he looked at Nero, each time he stood in front of the public, Sporus was reminded that he no longer had a life of his own. He was no longer an individual, he was a mere puppet, a tool in Nero's cruel fantasy. The emotional and psychological toll on Sporus was unimaginable. The pain wasn't just physical, it was a profound loss of self. How could anyone endure living in someone else's shadow, pretending to be a woman he was not, trapped in a life that wasn't his own? Sporus's suffering was not just about the abuse he endured, it was about the psychological destruction that left him without identity, agency, or hope. For years, Sporus lived a life defined by Nero's obsession. His body had been reshaped, his identity erased, and his will bent to serve the emperor's twisted desires. Sporus became the perfect embodiment of Nero's grief-driven fantasy, a living image of the woman Nero could never let go of. But as the years wore on, the emotional weight of his existence began to suffocate him. The humiliation, the constant performances, the pain of being someone he was not, it all became too much to bear. In the end, the tragic fate of Sporus unfolded as Nero's empire continued its spiral into chaos. While the exact circumstances of Sporus's death remain unclear, some sources suggest that he was executed by Nero or possibly met a brutal end due to the emperor's continuing cruelty. Sporus's life, long defined by torment and forced identity, was tragically cut short, leaving behind a haunting legacy of manipulation and control. The ultimate tragedy of Sporus's life was not just the suffering he endured, but the complete destruction of his identity. A boy who had once had a future of his own was reduced to nothing more than an object of Nero's obsession, and even death could not restore the humanity that had been stripped away. What does Sporus's tragic fate reveal about the dangers of absolute power? How far can obsession and control stretch before it destroys not just the lives of others, but the soul of the one wielding that power? Nero's descent into madness and his treatment of Sporus is a haunting reminder of the devastating effects unchecked obsession can have on individuals and societies alike. What do you think about Nero's actions and the lengths he went to satisfy his grief and control? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Was Sporus merely a victim of Nero's power, or was there something deeper at play? If this story shocked you, hit that like button, subscribe for more untold histories, and join the conversation. Let's keep exploring these dark truths of the past together.